Ancient burials. They seem straightforward until you discover that tiny-brained human relatives might have been performing complex funeral rituals 250,000 years ago. That discovery is completely reshaping what we thought we knew about the evolution of human behavior.
Well, that's fascinating. You're talking about Homo naledi, right? The discoveries in South Africa's Rising Star cave system really turned archaeology on its head.
Exactly right. And here's what makes this so mind-blowing. These hominins had brains only about one-third the size of modern humans. Yet the evidence suggests they may have been deliberately placing their dead in deep, hard-to-reach cave chambers.
Though I understand there's quite a bit of debate about whether these were actually intentional burials. What's the strongest evidence supporting that interpretation?
The most compelling evidence comes from the 2025 eLife paper, which describes articulated skeletal remains preserved in sediment matrix. Basically, bones still connected in ways that suggest they were covered quickly before decomposition could set in. And this pattern appears multiple times.
But critics have raised some pretty significant concerns about that interpretation, haven't they?
Oh, yes. A 2024 paper in the Journal of Human Evolution points out several issues. The sedimentology isn't conclusive. They haven't found clear grave cuts, and natural deposition hasn't been ruled out. Plus, there's the puzzling question of how bodies even got into such inaccessible cave chambers in the first place.
So, what you're saying is that if Homo naledi really did bury their dead, it would mean mortuary behavior evolved independently across different hominin species, regardless of brain size?
That's exactly right. And speaking of controversial interpretations, let me tell you about the famous flower burial discovered at Shanidar Cave in Iraq. In the 1960s, archaeologists found pollen clusters near a Neanderthal skeleton and immediately imagined mourners placing flowers on the grave.
Let me guess. There turned out to be a less romantic explanation?
Well, later research showed the pollen could have been brought in by rodents, a perfect example of how we need to be careful about projecting our own ideas onto the past. But here's what's interesting. Even without the flowers, the Neanderthal evidence for intentional burial is actually quite strong.
How so?
At Shanidar alone, they've found multiple individuals, carefully placed in shallow pits, some with flexed body positions. And this pattern repeats across Europe and Western Asia, from La Chapelle-aux-Saints in France to Kebara in Israel. By 60 to 70,000 years ago, Neanderthals were consistently burying their dead.
That's quite different from the Homo naledi case. It sounds like there's much more solid evidence here.
Absolutely right. And when we look at early Homo sapiens burials, the evidence becomes even more compelling. At sites like Qafzeh and Skhul in Israel, we're finding burials from 100 to 120,000 years ago with clear signs of intentional placement, ochre use, and even grave goods.
And didn't they just make some new discoveries at Tinshemet Cave?
Yes, the 2025 findings there are remarkable. Multiple burials around 100,000 years old, with bodies carefully arranged in fetal positions and evidence of ochre staining. It really strengthens the case for an established burial tradition among early Homo sapiens in the Levant.
You know what I find fascinating? The methods archaeologists use to determine whether something is actually a burial. It's not just about finding bones in the ground, is it?
Not at all. They look at multiple lines of evidence, sediment micromorphology to identify cut edges and disturbed layers, body articulation to see if bones stayed connected in ways that required quick burial, taphonomic context to check for animal activity or natural processes, and even geochemical analysis for things like phosphate concentrations and mineral profiles.
That's quite a scientific process. And I imagine it helps explain why the Homo naledi case remains so controversial. Because several of these indicators are still disputed?
Exactly. And there's another layer to all this that we haven't discussed yet, the ethical implications. When we label something a burial, we're making statements about intention, ritual, and meaning that can affect how modern societies view both the past and themselves.
That's an important point. How do archaeologists handle those ethical considerations?
Well, there's increasing emphasis on collaboration with local communities, transparency in excavation methods, and avoiding sensationalized headlines. The Naledi case actually highlights this perfectly. The initial media coverage about ritual burial by a small brain species got way ahead of the peer review process.
So, what's the big picture here? What does all this evidence tell us about the evolution of burial practices?
It suggests that burial behavior wasn't a single spark that appeared suddenly with modern humans. Instead, it seems to have emerged gradually across different hominin species, though exactly how and when is still debated.
And I suppose that challenges our assumptions about human uniqueness?
Precisely. Whether or not Homo naledi proves to be a true case of intentional burial, we can see that mortuary practices developed in different ways across different species. It's not a simple story of primitive versus modern behavior.
That really changes how we think about human evolution and consciousness, doesn't it?
It does, and it raises fascinating questions about why different species began treating their dead in special ways. Was it purely practical? Was it about social bonds? Or was it the beginning of symbolic thought and ritual?
Those questions really get to the heart of what makes us human.
They do indeed. And as we continue to make new discoveries, we might find that the story of how we learn to care for our dead is even more complex and surprising than we imagine.